Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Stewart. I'm the director of the West Tennessee Research and Education Center, but until recently, I was the extension entomologist at this same location, which you happen to see pictured in the background. Because of that, it's going to fall on me for our 2021 Cotton Focus program, of course, virtually to talk about insect management and give an insect update. I'm going to break this into three separate videos to make it a little bit more manageable for your viewing pleasure. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And the first topic that I'm going to talk about is going to be thrips. So I'm really going to break this down, as I said, into three videos. First talking about thrips, the next video being plant bugs, and the third video talking about bollworm management in cotton. And those are the three big pests that we traditionally deal with in cotton. First, let's just talk about what we know. We know that thrips can be a pretty substantial pest of cotton if they're not managed. For a number of years, all across the Mid-South, we conducted insecticide seed treatment trials of all different nature, looking at insecticide control, primarily of tobacco thrips. This top line that you see bolded here is talking about the average lint yield increase we saw by managing thrips as opposed to doing nothing. That was across 67 trials. This is a little bit dated information, but it was information collected over about a 7 or 8 year period in those 67 trials. So we know there's a significant economic advantage on average to managing thrips in cotton. You don't always realize this return. Sometimes you see no benefit, but other times it's substantially more. So the first thing I want to do is show a thrips efficacy trial in Jackson, and this is what we call one of our regional trials. It's done by all my counterparts in other states of the Mid-South as well, and we've been doing these kind of trials for a number of years. The real take-home message of this slide is that we have a number of tools that we can reduce thrips injury with. They do vary in their efficacy. So what you're looking at here is trial results, and in particular, you're looking at final thrips injury rating that was made at the 4th leaf stage on these cotton seedlings, evaluating these various insecticides, including AgLogic, which is Aldicarb at 4 pounds per rate, in-furrow treatment of imidacloprid, that's what the IF stands for, an in-furrow treatment of orthene at a pound, a gaucho seed treatment plus that pound of orthene applied in furrow, Arrow with Eris, which is imidacloprid plus another insecticide ingredient, imidacloprid or gaucho by itself, a gaucho seed treatment plus an orthene seed treatment at the full label rate, and just an orthene seed treatment, and of course an untreated check. And I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, most of the standard treatments that we'd recommend significantly reduce thrips injury. None of them reduced it substantially. There wasn't one that was really, really good, but there were a couple that were a little bit weaker, and I want to spend a minute talking about that. So if you go to other geographies in the Mid-South, one of their favorite treatments would be to overtreat orthene seed treatment on top of an imidacloprid or gaucho seed treatment. I'm a little less excited by that because what I've seen in my test in recent years is that acephate, either as a seed treatment or by itself as an in-furrow treatment, isn't providing particularly good control. It's certainly better than the check, and in fact, it gives more plant protection in terms of yield than you'd actually see based on these injury ratings. But I'm not seeing a benefit really to adding it to a gaucho seed treatment. That's a little bit different in other geographies, and the reason is now we have some pretty good information that our tobacco thrips are in fact developing resistance to some of these insecticides, specifically acephate, but I suspect it also transcends itself to other OP insecticides like bidrin or dimethoate. That doesn't mean they're not providing any protection at all. We've known for a long time that we have some resistance to neonicotinoid insecticides, which includes imidacloprid or gaucho, but gaucho is still providing considerable protection, in most cases, probably adequate protection in terms of preventing yield loss. We're switching gears here and talk about the efficacy of foliar implied insecticides. And because none of our at-planting insecticides are foolproof, particularly when you get in tough emergence conditions, tough weather conditions, and high thrips pressure, it's very often necessary to to make a foliar applied insecticide application. Normally, when we suggest doing that, it's usually one insecticide application made very early on. Really about the first leaf stage is the best timing. In this case, you're looking at a trial that was done on cotton that didn't have any insecticide seed treatment. And we actually made 2 insecticide applications because in this test, we had very poor emergence conditions and very high thrips populations. So what you're looking at again is thrips injury on a scale of 0 to 5 for a number of insecticides. First thing I want to point out is that pyrethroid insecticides are very poor at controlling thrips, or including tobacco thrips. And you see that the Warrior treatment, which is a pyrethroid insecticide, really numerically did nothing. The other thing I want to point out is that all of our other treatments, which are recommended in our insect control recommendations, are significantly reducing thrips injury, some a little bit better than others. One thing you'll notice here is that the low rate of orthene, which has historically been 0.2 a pound, the standard rate, is not quite as sharp. And again, I think this is reflecting some of that resistance that we're seeing. Actually, it'd have been worse had we only made one insecticide application. We do see that the other things like orthene and bidrin, the other OPs, including bidrin and dimethoate, are doing okay. They're not doing as well as the treatments down there at the bottom labeled Radiant or Intrepid Edge. They both contain the same active ingredient, spineteram, at the same rate. And in recent years, that's actually been the best insect treatment or foliar insecticide treatment for thrips in my trials. Historically, that hasn't always been the case. Acephate ran neck and neck, but because of this resistance, we're starting to see it separate. Now, I wanted to give you a visual image of this trial at Milan because, again, it was a very substantial thrips pressure. On the left, you're looking at cotton that didn't have an insecticide seed treatment or a foliar application, and you can essentially see that it's bare ground. You'll see some of that also reflected into these plots, which I've taken the liberty of labeling some of them. So again, we made 2 insecticide applications on top of cotton that didn't have an insecticide seed treatment. We made those applications at the first leaf and the second leaf. On the left here, and I'm going to just point out these check plots throughout the test in the first rep, the second rep, the third rep, and the fourth rep, you can see the check plots are pretty bad. Maybe not as bad as the border over here, but part of that is you do get a little drift from the adjacent plots. You can also see these this pyrethroid treatment, in this case Warrior, was also very, very poor, as bad as the check. Now, although we do have some resistance to orthene, and this really should say 0.2 a pound of orthene right here, you can see with 2 applications, it's substantially better than doing nothing. You'll also see that the Intrepid Edge treatments and the Radiant treatments tend to shine in this test a little bit more. Now, when all was said and done, really what this test showed was if you made a treatment, you preserved the yield potential that was out there, unless you used the Warrior insecticide. Now, one thing I do want to point out is these yields are very, very poor. The best treatment's approaching 1,600 pounds of seed cotton, which is probably 700 pounds of lint. So we did not have high yielding conditions, struggled in Milan with cool, wet weather to start with and cool, wet weather to end. And that's not a good combination when you have a slow start owing to thrips and other conditions as well. You do see that maybe there's a little indication that this lower rate of orthene lost a little something in yield, but it's statistically didn't separate. Now, we're also doing some studies both in Jackson and Milan looking at the impact of plant density and insecticide seed treatment in combination on thrips injury. And we're doing this because I've seen over the years that it almost appears like when we get thinner plant stands, the thrips injuries actually worse than when we have thicker plant stands. And we're not really sure why that's happening, but our data is confirming that. This is the research being done by Jessica Krob, a master's student under my program here at the West Tennessee Center. What you're looking at is 2 graphs looking at thrips injury. On the left, you're looking at the main effect of an insecticide seed treatment, gaucho again, and you can see that the gaucho insecticide seed treatment significantly reduced thrips injury. What's probably most interesting is if you look to the right, what you'll see is the impact of that plant stand on injury. And if you have lower plant populations, you also see more thrips injury. And what this can lead to is if you have a poor stand to begin with, and then you have intense thrips pressure, it's going to make it more necessary for you to probably make that foliar insecticide application, or in some cases, even 2 applications to control thrips. We also did some ratings just looking at plants that were kind of lone soldiers out by themselves and plants that were more or less growing in a clump. And again, it kind of reflected the same thing. Isolated plants, whether they had an insecticide seed treatment on the left or not on the right, just tended to have worse thrips injury than those that were growing in clumps. Now, we took some video of this just to give you a visual representation, and this video does not show the plots that were planted at 2 seed per foot, because you can kind of see a peak of them onto the left, but they were essentially bare ground. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with 2 rows of an insecticide seed treatment at 4 seed per foot, and then the next 2 rows are untreated, and we're going to see that pattern replicate across this video with various different seed densities. And I think it's going to demonstrate 2 things. First, that insecticide seed treatments, even though we have resistance, do have some benefit. And second, I think you'll see this plant density effect. So again, as we go across, there are 2 rows treated with imidacloprid gaucho seed treatment that was planted at 4 seed per foot. It didn't emerge at that. You can see essentially bare ground where we didn't have an insecticide seed treatment. This is a higher planting density right here with an insecticide seed treatment. And the next 2 rows is the same planting density without an insecticide seed treatment. There's a few plants there, and this is the highest planting density, very high, in fact, 16 plants per foot. Probably came up at the range of 8 to 10 plants per foot. And this is that same treatment without an insecticide seed treatment. So I want to end this presentation talking about a new technology that's out there, Thrive-On. Thrive-On won't be commercially available for sale in 2021, but the expectation is it will be the following year. It's got its regulatory approvals, and they're essentially waiting export approvals so they can grow it on larger acreages. There are going to be a number of plots around the Mid-South, including Tennessee, that are relatively large plots that growers and consultants are going to manage and get some experiences this year. We had some relatively large plot work in Milan this year, and that's what you're looking at in the picture. And the first thing I really want to point out are the white squares. If you're inside the white square, you have that Thrive-On technology. What our experiences has shown us in past years is that Thrive-On technology, which is a BT technology, provides excellent thrips control. So all the cotton in this test had an insecticide seed treatment, but I think it's very evident where you look inside those squares that cotton's doing substantially better. And at this time of year, it's because of the thrips control that it provided. In fact, I have a couple of notes on the top there. We never rated thrips injury in the Thrive-On plots as greater than a 0.5 on a 0 to 5 scale. That's essentially unheard of with any type of insecticide seed treatment or in-furrow treatment for thrips control. On the other hand, if we had the other plots, the non-Thrive-On plots, our injury ratings in untreated plots were about 3.5. And again, keep in mind, this had an insecticide seed treatment. So when I say untreated, I meant no foliar application. And where we made a foliar application of Intrepid Edge, we reduced that to 2.3. Again, very substantial thrips pressure here. And just to reinforce that point, that's that picture I showed you earlier of the foliar insecticide trial. In fact, I had the Bayer folks touring this test right here, and they're specifically looking in the untreated no seed treatment plots without the Thrive-On, and they made the comment that the seed treatment didn't appear to do anything at all. So I walked them right across over here and showed them that in fact it did have a significant advantage over doing nothing. So with that, I really want to drive home some take-home points. You have to be pretty good at thrips management, but you don't have to be perfect to preserve yield in normal circumstances. My recommendations are to start with an imidacloprid-based seed treatment, which pretty much everybody is. That's standard treatment throughout the Mid-South and the Southeast. You can consider some add-on treatments. For example, you could use the Eris treatment, which has been very good. For me in recent years, it's added a little bit of protection above imidacloprid or gaucho alone. You could also consider an orthene seed treatment or an in-furrow treatment, but I have shown you that in West Tennessee, based on my experience, that's not as good an option. Another option, of course, is to do something totally in-furrow. You could use AgLogic, the substitute for timic in furrow. We know that provides good thrips control. You can also spray imidacloprid in furrow, but I've not seen much advantage of that treatment versus a seed treatment by itself. However, given that we do have some resistance, I think your expectation is that you should probably be planning on making a foliar insecticide application at that 1 to 2 leaf cotton stage. And again, this is presuming you have an imidacloprid seed treatment. I don't think using orthene is going to be a big problem for us. I think we can continue to use it because we have the seed treatment, so that's providing some protection. But I would suggest that you use a higher rate of acephate, or you could consider using Bidrin. I think those are good alternatives. By higher rate of acephate, I would probably settle on a ½ pound when you're making that application. That does seem to overcome some of that resistance that we're encountering. The other option is to use a product like Intrepid Edge, which is providing better control, but it is at a premium price. Another recommendation is don't cut your seeding rates too low, and make sure you have a good fungicide seed treatment package on there. Finally, I'll just put a plug in again for the Thrips infestation predictor model that's available online. You can just Google that, but it's a pretty good tool for predicting what kind of thrips pressure you're going to face and what kind of thrips injury you might see on your cotton, given your location and your planting date. I finally conclude with the comment I made about Thrive On. Our experiences, myself and my colleagues, is this really is going to be the easy button. If we adopt this technology, at least in the near and midterm, we're not expecting that any other thrips management would be necessary on Thrive On cotton. Final plug for our resources online. We've recently revamped our utcrops.com website. You can go to any of these websites, including our UT Pest Guide site, and navigate back and forth seamlessly between these sites. We have a lot of good content up there, and I hope everybody takes a look and uses these resources. Very mobile friendly. With that, I appreciate everybody's attention. Sorry we have to meet this way, but I bet it'll be better next year.